Brilliant ideas, powered by Hyundai Motor.
The contemporary art world is vibrant and booming as never before. It's a 21st century phenomenon, a global industry in its own right. Brilliant Ideas looks at the artists at the heart of this, artists with the unique power to astonish, challenge and surprise. In this programme, New York painter Francesco Clemente. Welcome to the world of Francesco Clemente. As an artist, he's a one-off. A nomad, a storyteller, a philosopher, a joker, a creator of strange, dreamlike worlds. He's known for his oil paintings, frescoes, and above all, watercolors. An artist whose commitment to painting brought it back to the mainstream after years of minimalism and conceptual art.
When I begin, the direction, the compass of what I do is emotional, and that determines what colors I'm going to use. You know, you have to put the same care into it that you would put if you were caressing a person, or, you know, when you paint, you're touching someone's body. That's what you're doing.
Francesco Clemente is a painter of life. He's a painter of people, but most importantly, he's a painter of intimacy.
He's an exceptional artist. Francesco is one of the inventors of multicultural art. So the aesthetic of Italy, America, India, to build a completely unique vision, a vision that has been very, very influential.
Francesco Clemente was born in 1952 and grew up in Naples.
Like Marseille, like New Orleans, Naples is a city where the rich and the poor are not segregated from each other, which makes Naples a very witty city, because the absurdity of social inequality, it's so apparent every day of the week. And the only code that becomes important is a code of dignity and flair.
As a young man, aged 21, Francesco started travelling and headed to India, a trip that turned out to be life-changing.
I was looking for another narrative of the contemporary world, and I did find it in India. Being a place of enormous diversity, both ethnically and culturally, every community has their own tradition, ritual, beliefs. Ya Rahimu, Ya Karimu, Allahu Almin Kul Kainat ke Malik. Aapas mein mohabbat pyar se hum sab ji sake. When I first arrived to Delhi, one of the places I ended up being attracted to was the Nizamuddin Mosque. It's the tomb of a Sufi saint, you know, Muslim saint, and the cult of the Hindus within the walls of the site were happening at the same time. I was enchanted with that. They play Qawwali songs. Qawwalis are really love songs, but they're love songs directed not towards a man or a woman, but toward God. So it's big love. I realized that diversity could be really my subject matter, diversity of expression, diversity of acceptance, I realized that there isn't really one truth, that there are many truths, and the goal is to step back and let all these different views take place.
Well, I think Francesco would be nothing without India. India absolutely informs him, and he spent so much time there. And he not only appreciated the philosophies of Indian thinking as expressed in art, but also the craftsmanship.
At the end of the 1970s, Francesco was invited to exhibit in New York. Now married and with 4 children, he moved there in 1980 to a studio in Manhattan.
It was an extremely dangerous part of town. The city was bankrupt. Downtown Manhattan was a completely dilapidated, to my eyes, beautiful place, because I like anything that bears the marks of time. And, you know, here I am.
His entire body of work could be understood as a self-portrait, and he's certainly someone that has painted himself, but he's painted the people that are meaningful to him. He's painted his family, he's painted his world, he's painted what surrounds him and what gives him a sense of meaning in the world.
Having settled in New York, Francesco fell in with his Manhattan neighbours, who included the artists Andy Warhol and Jean-Michel Basquiat, and Beat Generation writers Allen Ginsberg and William Burroughs.
I thought it was almost my duty to keep a record of these remarkable personalities who were in transit in New York. I portrayed the poets, the artists, and some bystanders who were interesting and willing to sit. I do all my portraits from life in one sitting. Allen Ginsberg became a friend, and we collaborated on a number of books. He was very fond of William Blake, and so am I. And the next step was to make illuminated manuscripts like William Blake had made.
Francesco's work moved to another level when he was invited to show at the 1980 Venice Biennale. His works were seen as a return to painting against the prevailing styles of minimalism and conceptual art.
I was coming from this backwater southern Italian culture which was disputing modernism to begin with. Little I knew that this lack of knowledge or lack of faith in modernism would be then translated into a postmodern stance. This was a complete qui pro quo. I mean, my weakness became my strength.
All of the themes in Francesco's work come together in his latest project, one of the biggest he's ever undertaken.
Ideas. Ideas.
At the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art in North Adams, Francesco Clemente is attempting something new and different. A huge 30,000 square foot installation. This is Encampment, a fleet of painted tents. It's been created over 3 years in collaboration with a community of artists in Rajasthan, India.
I've been told that I'm a nomadic artist, and when I was told that, I thought of what implements does a nomadic person has, and the first implement that comes to mind is tents.
Secured in place by ropes and cast iron weights, the cotton and bamboo structures transform the gallery into a village of tents.
You know, it seems as if the world is in search of purity, but I do not believe in purity. I believe in contamination. I believe in encounters between different cultures. And so I adopted the vocabulary of tents, and this vocabulary is deeply contaminated. It is a painting you can walk in, It is an architecture that does not have any foundation. It's an architecture that doesn't violate the ground, and I love that too.
At Masmoka, all of the tents that Francesco has been working on for the past few years came together for the first time. I've been fortunate to visit the individual sites where they've been exhibited at Berlin, in Cochin in India, and in New York. But I felt that collectively they really showed the tremendous scope and vastness of his vision in a new way.
I find the process of putting the tents up very charming. It's a little bit like going sailing. You know, there are ropes involved, there is a mast that has to go up first, and then you have to pull, and then you have to push, and then you have to find an adjustment, and it's not science. There is a great degree of personal interpretation involved on how this tent should stand, how crooked it should be, how straight it should be. I love all of that.
The tents are made in a factory in Jodhpur, Rajasthan, which used to make military tents for the Indian Army, a process that draws on a long tradition of craftsmanship.
This again resonates with me because in a way I think there is a connection between war and art. You know, art is the anti-war, is the other narrative that one can offer away from conflict. The outside is printed with wood blocks that are carved after my drawings, and then there is embroidery on top of that. To achieve that, I make small drawings which are then carved in wood, and they get printed by hand. These are the drawings which I make for the wood blocks. There is a limit to the size of the wood blocks, it's 7 inches by 7 inches. They establish a kind of general vocabulary, and then some of these images return inside the tents. For example, this guy here comes from my encounter with the Candomblé religion that is now active in Brazil. And the image of this guy returns in the Devil's Tent. He wears a monocle, he smokes a cigarette, he's in a white tie and the top hat. And when I started to paint that tent, I realized that the audience would have thought of 1920s German bankers, and then I thought, well, they may as well, because times haven't really changed that much. These are magic squares. In the Islamic architecture, you can add all the numbers in any given direction and get the same sum. It is really a vocabulary that is made almost as you would make amulets for yourself to protect yourself from whatever disturbance can be there.
While very, very ripely experienced, he's not jaded. He still has that yearning, that curiosity that he then instills in us with his art, and particularly these tents.
Each of the 6 tents has a theme, and Francesco sees them as a specific sequence of experiences for the visitor.
The first tent that you encounter is called Standing with Truth, after a ode from Kabir, who was a great mystic in India in the 16th century. The theme is being present as a human being. And then after that you encounter the angel's tent and the devil's tent. But again, there is no sense of purity that the next world is better than this. All the angels are exhausted, some of them are wounded, others are drowning. And in the same way, in the devil's tent, you find also small details that show love or desire, seen as a comfort and not as an enemy.
Francesco's next tent, the pepper tent, was made for Cochin, the spice port in Kerala. It's full of images inspired by that lucrative trade across the Indian Ocean. And then there's the taking refuge tent, a place of safety where a sheep sits in the lap of a wolf and a mouse in front of a cat. Images of reconciliation.
I imagine as a viewer, you ask yourself, well, this is all very nice that everyone is sitting and contemplating, but when this activity ends, what will happen? It may not be pretty. And then the last tent to encounter is the museum tent, which is more humorous and contains self-portraits, but the self-portraits are surrounded by very elaborate rococo frames, and they're reaching out of the frames to the audience. So there is a narrative that you can read in as many ways as you want.
Francesco's work is so beautiful and so approachable that you don't necessarily need to know that much in terms of iconography or historical movements to approach his art. You can come to his work with fresh eyes and really take a lot away from it.
I consider it a success when any member of the audience sits down on the ground. We have mats on the ground. And so whenever I see somebody sit down, and I did see it, or even lie down to look at the ceiling, I think that that is a success. Today, every single signal we receive is a signal that says, hurry. My signal, the ambition of my signal is to say, slow down.
Ideas. Ideas.
Francesco Clemente has now been a figure on the New York art scene for over 30 years and travels between his 2 studios by bike. His newer space, on this side of the East River in Brooklyn, is where he does his larger oil paintings. Former industrial areas like this are where many New York artists have chosen to work.
We have moved from my downtown studio, which is where I started to work in New York. I wanted to be closer to the water, and I wanted more light in the winter months. This is the first portrait I made in this format, and is a portrait of my wife, Alba, my wife of 40 years. I always felt that women are more intelligent than men, because to me, intelligence is flexibility, to be adaptable, and also to play a part without really believing in the part. And I think that type of intelligence is more frequent in women than in men. So my wife is definitely more intelligent than me, and let's put this on film, that way she knows I mean it. This is a fresco. Yeah. So you see the transparency of the color of the pigment, so it's the most luminous medium of all. I'm reluctant to talk about the iconography, but I do. And in this case, gifts, but then one of the gifts is that. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know.
For Clemente, death isn't the end. It's just the beginning. What comes out is this wry sort of Cheshire cat knowing humor. There's observational wryness about life. When you know the cyclical nature of life, you can distance yourself from the silliness of life and observe it quite coolly and dispassionately, but with a benign amusement.
At a gallery in London's West End, Francesco is showing a large collection of 108 watercolours called Emblems of Transformation. They're intricate, whimsical and beautiful. As with the tents, he's working with Rajasthani craftsmen, miniature painters who add their drawings to his watercolour backgrounds according to his master plans.
The beauty of painting is that through painting, you place on the table your own narrative, but you place it with enough ambiguity that the viewer can also recognize elements in his own life and add to the story. I'm very fond of the image of this hand holding a torch and coming out of this dark door or dark gate. What it is, I know as much as the viewer does. I mean, I see it as an invitation to step into the dark and find out that there is something there too. One should not be afraid of the dark. Once I was told, when you look at a rainbow, you should always look from left to right and then look back, from right to left. So the rainbow is really also this image of a complete perception. You should always embrace the whole thing, both ways, going both ways. In the case of this image, the rainbows are also bridges, they're also borders between the animal world and the vegetal world and the sky. Then there are sometimes naughty images, if you want, which are more explicit about the body and the functioning of the body. So there are images of sexual activity in my work, but they are there in the same way they are there in the Buddhist tradition, in the Hindu tradition, the alchemic tradition, in the Sufi tradition. They're all there. If someone gets uncomfortable with the sexual imagery, so be it.
What he's doing is enjoying and luxuriating in the freedom that really early Indian culture in particular embraced. He's rid himself of the sort of guilt-laden dogmatics of Christian culture and embraced the freedom that the Indian culture has to offer.
I believe what I make is profoundly political and profoundly connected to the world. I am very aware of what is going on in the rest of the, outside of my studio. I know what's going on. I do. But I decide not to help. I decide to stay here and make what I make and offer an alternative narrative.
I believe that Francesco is one of those special artists who does believe that his art can improve the world. And his art certainly has improved my world.
Okay. An image of a pair of scissors that cannot be opened. You can't cut anything with it. They're wrapped in a ribbon. When I grew up, when a child was born, you would hang a ribbon to the door of the building, a blue one for a boy and a pink one for a girl. So life overcomes death. So there's nothing to worry about.
Brilliant ideas, powered by Hyundai Motor.